Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. You know, if you've ever stepped foot inside a high-intensity gym, you already know the vibe. It's absolutely electric. But behind all those heavy lifts and the sweat angels on the floor, there's a hidden risk that athletes face pretty much every single day. So today, we're diving into a really fascinating scientific study published in Acta Gymnica. This research actually proves exactly how we can mitigate the notoriously high injury risks associated with CrossFit, and it all comes down to a very specific targeted mobility protocol.
So here is our roadmap for today. First, the CrossFit injury problem. Second, measuring risk with FMS. Third, the MobilityWod experiment. Fourth, the surprising results. And fifth, takeaways for your training. All right, let's jump right into Section 1, the CrossFit injury problem. We really have to start by establishing the core conflict that every high-intensity athlete inevitably faces when they're pushing their limits. It's kind of a paradox, right? Is getting fit actually getting you hurt? I mean, if you're a dedicated athlete, you've probably felt this double-edged sword firsthand. You push hard, you see these incredible gains, your endurance just skyrockets, but then, bam, suddenly a shoulder tweaks or a knee starts aching. It's a super frustrating reality where pushing for peak performance often just leads straight to a physical breakdown. Because let's face it, CrossFit really is a double-edged sword. On one hand, absolutely, it dramatically improves your physical fitness through regular, systematic work. But on the flip side, the exact things that make it so effective, like the highly variable intensity and the lack of a standardized routine, well, they can lead to some pretty dangerous consequences. Because the workouts are so intense, athletes experience what researchers call pattern overload. Basically, this is a level of repeated, high-stress movement that is almost unheard of in other sports, and it makes the overall risk of injury exceptionally high. And because of all that pattern overload, the joint and muscle damage doesn't just spread out evenly. It tends to concentrate in specific areas: your shoulders, knees, the lumbar spine or lower back, the elbows, and the wrists. I mean, these are literally the hinges and anchors of your body, and they are highly, highly stressed during complex lifts and gymnastics. And get this, if you have less than 6 months of experience, or if you train fewer than 3 days a week, your risk actually goes up even further.
Okay, moving on to Section 2, measuring risk with FMS.
Now, in sports science, we don't just sit around and guess who's going to get hurt. We want objective data. And that brings us to the Functional Movement Screen, or FMS for short. To put it simply, the FMS is an objective, standardized test used by physiotherapists to expose bad movement habits. Think of it like plugging your car into a diagnostic computer, but for your body. It identifies compensatory movement patterns, which honestly is just a fancy science way of saying your body is cheating. If your ankles are too tight, while your lower back compensates to make the movement happen. The FMS exposes those sneaky asymmetries before they actually snap a ligament. So the screen itself consists of 7 fundamental movements. You've got the deep squat, hurdle step, inline lunge, shoulder mobility, active straight leg raise, trunk stability push-up, and finally, rotational stability. When you take a closer look at how this is actually measured, each test is scored on a really strict scale from 0 to 3. A 0 means the movement causes you actual physical pain, while a 3 means you executed the pattern flawlessly without your body cheating at all. Add it all up, and the maximum possible total score is 21 points.
But here is the absolute kicker. The magic number you need to remember is 14. Extensive sports science research shows that scoring a 14 or less on the FMS means you possess significant dysfunctional movement patterns. Essentially, if you score 14 or below, you're in the danger zone. Your probability of suffering a serious injury during physical activity goes way, way up.
All right, that brings us to Section 3, the MobilityWod experiment.
So a team of researchers in Poland set up this really elegant 8-week study. They took 30 experienced male CrossFitters. These were guys aged 20 to 35 who were already hitting the gym 5 days a week. In week 0, they tested everyone to get their baseline FMS scores. Then, for weeks 1 through 8, they didn't overhaul the athletes' entire lives. Instead, they simply added one single 45-minute mobility workout of the day, or WOD, session to their week, just one. Finally, in week 9, they retested them to see what, if anything, actually changed.
So what did they actually do for those 45 minutes? Well, the protocol breaks down into 3 main components. First up, self-myofascial release using foam rollers and lacrosse balls. This applies pressure to relax the tissues and creates controlled microdamage that literally signals your body to regenerate the area faster. Second, joint separation using heavy resistance bands. The bands pull against the joints, creating much-needed space in the joint cavity and allowing for unblocked, freer movement. And third, they were highly targeted. They spent a focused 1 to 2 minutes on each individual body part and limb.
Let's get to the best part. Section 4, the surprising results.
The protocol was, quite frankly, a massive success, and the numbers tell an amazing story. Before starting the MobilityWod, the average score was 15.9. Now, remember our magic number. That 15.9 means a lot of these athletes were dangerously close to that 14-point threshold, showing obvious movement compensations. But after the 8 weeks, the group average jumped up to a much safer 17.3. The researchers noted this was a statistically significant medium effect size, which is a science-heavy way of saying this intervention clearly worked.
But you know what's even more interesting? The dramatic drop in absolute risk. Before starting the program, a shocking 26% of these highly experienced athletes were sitting right in the danger zone, scoring a 14 or less. I mean, they were essentially ticking time bombs for joint or muscle injury. After just 8 weeks of targeted mobility work once a week, that number plummeted down to 6%. They successfully pulled 20% of their athletes out of the high-risk category entirely.
And finally, let's wrap things up with Section 5, takeaways for your training.
If we break down these results movement by movement, a really clear pattern pops out. The deep squat, shoulder mobility, and active straight leg raise all saw massive, significant improvements. All that flossing, rolling, and banding, it directly opened up those hips and shoulders. However, rotational stability remained the absolute weakest link. Why? Because rotational stability requires multi-plane core stability. It demands your deep core muscles to perfectly coordinate with your limbs. So this tells us that while opening up your joints is absolutely crucial, you also have to actively train your deep core to control that brand new range of motion.
I want you to consider this direct quote from the researchers because it is a total paradigm shift. They wrote, "Functioning in compensatory movement patterns leads to, paradoxically, in the case of physically active people, deterioration of their physical fitness." Just let that sink in for a second. If you're pushing hard in the gym but your form is compromised because your joints are tight, you aren't just risking a muscle tear. You are actively making yourself less fit over time by confusing your central nervous system.
So I'm going to leave you with a final thought to mull over. We just saw the data, right? Just 45 minutes a week drops the injury danger zone rate from 26% all the way down to 6%. So the question is, are you dedicating 45 minutes a week to roll out, band up, and actually protect your joints? Or are you just ignoring the pattern overload and waiting for your luck to run out? Think about how you can integrate this into your own routine this week. Thank you so much for joining me today, and keep training smart.